So this week I thought I would share a bit of a tips video on a useful little technique called indenting. And it's from a tutorial that I've just created. It only took about an hour and a half to do, and it's using an embossing tool like what I've got in my hand here, and also one of the clay making tools, which is a wooden tool. And basically what you do is you draw the hair in, or the texture of the hair into the paper before you put any pencil on, and it creates these indents on the paper, and I'm using a hot press paper here. It creates these indents that when you bring your pencil in over the top, the pencil skips over the little marks that the indenting tool has created, and you get marks that look like hair. It can be a really, really fantastic technique to use. You've got to get the pressure right. So it's a little bit sort of like a Goldilocks pressure. It's got to be not too hard and not too light. And with this particular technique, I find that more is better than less. If you put too few hairs in, what can happen is it can just look a little bit sporadic and not really like fur at all. Whereas if you go a little bit crazy and you get actually lots and lots and lots of these little hair-like marks in, it creates a much better end result. So this is another tool that I use. This is a wooden clay making tool that I'm using to do in the indenting. This has a softer end to it. It's still got a pointy end, but it's a little bit softer than the metal embossing tool that I was using. Again, using sort of relatively hard pressure to squash that tooth into the paper, create these fur details so that when I start to bring the pencils in over the top, the pencil skips over and around these indented marks and then creates the feel of fur. So once I've got all of the indents in, I basically brought in the black surrounding the eye just to make it have a little bit more form. And then you can see I'm just using the black polychromos here just to very gently bring pigment in over the top of the indented lines. And you can see how nicely it works. We're starting to get the feel of fur in there. You know, wherever I bring the pencil and it goes over one of those little lines that we indented, it skips and it leaves a white space. So it's really, really great technique for creating those little hairs. It can be a little bit messy, and I have to admit it's not one of my favourite techniques, purely because you've got to do an awful lot of preparation beforehand. So the preparation is the bits that you can't really see, and you don't really know how it's going to turn out until you put your pencil on it. But that's the bit that I'm a bit gung-ho. I like to get stuck in there. I like to just, you know, start to see it coming together a little bit more, and spending time and being really careful with the indenting doesn't really fit with my laissez-faire attitude really. But saying that, this worked really, really nicely actually with what I was trying to do. And of course I had to show you the kind of the finished bit where we come in and we add all of the colour. This particular eye was quite a fun one to do actually, because I didn't really follow, it was green and yellow, but I didn't really pick out the absolute correct greens and yellows, and I had a bit of a play with this. This is a tutorial in the Academy. It's a really quick one and it's a really fun one to do. I stuck with just black polychromos for the outside, and then I brought the colours in. I think this is the light yellow glaze, and I just use a hot press paper. Drawing cat's eyes on hot press paper is quite a lot of fun actually, because it's about the layering, it's about the blending, it's about the bringing the colours in and you know, sort of burnishing a little bit, and yeah, it's quite a fun one to do. So if you fancy giving it a go, you can use anything that's sharp. I use the embossing tool, or you can use the clay making tool. You can even use your own fingernail if you want to, and it works really, really nicely. When it comes to coloured pencil, there are a few techniques that are absolutely fundamental to I guess the success of creating something that looks realistic. So in this video, I just wanted to kind of bring the technique of layering. I'm not sure whether I'd call it a technique. I mean, it basically is the foundation of coloured pencil, is layering. It's how you mix your colours. You know, if you work with watercolor or you work with oil paints or acrylics, you would tend to sort of mix colors on a palette, you know, but with colored pencils, it's more about kind of mixing on the surface. I guess it's quite good when you can find a color that almost matches the color that you're trying to you know, create on the surface of the animal that you're trying to create, but it's very, very rare that you're going to get a color that is the perfect match, and it's very rare that using just one color you're going to sort of be able to get the richness and also the depth that you're after. With this particular horse that I was drawing this month, I found a combination of 3, maybe 4 colours were a really, really perfect match. Not that I'm ever trying to match a colour exactly, I'm more interested in the values, and you can see that I've brought kind of values, I've brought little dark sort of elements in, and where we've got shadows and stuff in here. But you know, obviously colour is going to be important if you're drawing a realistic portrait of somebody's pet or horse or whatever. With this particular one, I'm working on drafting film, and I've found a combination of the Luminance Apricot, the Polychromos Burnt Sienna, and the Polychromos Caput Morton Violet has worked really, really well to get this quite vibrant, bright bay colour that I've got coming through on the top of the neck here. And it's a question, when it comes to layering, it's a question of getting those colours in over the top of each other. And what happens when you so I'm bringing the burnt sienna in at the moment here, and it goes down, and it's quite a sort of a reddy brown. It's a bit boring, I have to say. It's a bit flat with just that initial layer. But then when you start to bring in some of the other colours on the top of it, so the Caput Morton Violet in, or that really sort of bright orangey apricot colour, you start to get a lovely depth, and you start to get a glow in the you know, in the fur that you're drawing. It is a very slow process. You can see here it's almost like I'm drawing every single hair. I'm not. What I'm trying to do is bring a little bit of the texture in there. Film is a funny surface to draw on. You know, as soon as you get your pencil colour down, it sticks. You can't really blend it like you can with other pencils. But you can add little bits in here. You can see I'm adding the apricot in over the top of that burnt sienna, and it's kind of making it alive. It's bringing out a real richness in there. I don't need to add hundreds and hundreds of layers on the film. I probably get 20 at a push, you know, if I needed to. But if I can find a combination of colours that are going to give me that lovely rich bay colour, you know, just using those are going to kind of replicate that colour and give me a really, really lovely realistic look. So it's finding the colours that are going to work for you. Now, I don't tend to swatch, so I don't tend to jot all of the colours down that I'm going to use before I start drawing. I find, for me, that's quite limiting. So if I start to go through and I'll go, oh, I'm going to use this colour and this colour and this colour and this colour, I find that is quite limiting for me, and I prefer to pick the colours as I go through the actual piece. I will have an idea in mind as to the colours that I want to use, so I'll have almost like an inventory in my head. I'm going to be drawing a bay horse, what colours I'm going to use. I'll probably use Caput Morton Violet, I'll probably use burnt sienna, I'll probably use burnt ochre, I'll probably use a bit of, you know, terracotta, probably a little bit of walnut brown. But what I might do once I start kind of choosing those colours and putting them down on the surfaces, I might end up not choosing one of those and picking something instead. Like I might choose an Indian red, for example, or I might choose a Venetian red, which is a little bit more pinky. You know, and I don't want to be limited to you know, a set of swatches that I've created at the beginning. I also find creating the swatches at the beginning, for me, it's a little bit of a waste of time, really, because I'm just going to do my own thing once I get into the drawing. So I find it, I just don't. I know other people do, and that works for their techniques, but for me, I don't swatch. I colour mix on my page, and I have that inventory of colours going through my head. You know, so when I'm looking at my photograph, I look at the colour I'm trying to represent, and I have all of the pencils start floating around in my head. I can then pick and choose the ones that I want to use. The other thing that I've learnt to do sort of over the few years that I've been drawing is I can actually colour mix in my head. I think you get to know your colours and your pencils really, really well. So I know absolutely that if I bring Caput Morton Violet in over the top of Burnt Sienna, I'm going to get sort of like a really rich sort of orangey browny colour. And I also know that if I bring the apricot in over the top, I'm not going to get like a bright orange, but it's just going to really, really richen up the colours that I've got underneath it. So in this case, it's the Burnt Sienna and a little bit of the Caput Morton Violet. And then a touch of the Light Fast Flame, which is a really, really vibrant orange, which is going to give that lovely vibrancy that you're seeing coming through into the bright bay of the horse. I find working in sections when I'm layering really, really helps me and my brain to kind of comprehend what it is that I'm trying to do. There are many, many, many different roads to Rome, and you know, there's no right or wrong way to do something. This particular technique of me working in a section rather than kind of putting you know, going through layer and layer and layer over the entire subject, this particular way of creating these layers and the realism and everything, it just really helps me understand what it is that I'm trying to do. I work up a section at a time to the sort of like the end piece, the finished product. My brain then knows exactly what it is that I'm trying to do, and then I find it easier to work through the rest of the piece. So I might put, you can see I've put sort of like quite a large area of the apricot down, and then I start to work up little by little that section. So I go, you know, colour by colour. I know some artists kind of go, you know, they'll fill the entire section, then with another layer, then with another layer, then with another, and it's what works for you. And this particular way is how it works for me, and it's how I teach. I find I'm far more confident working in this way because I'm bringing each little bit up to an end bit and it looks realistic very, very quickly. And I need that for my peace of mind and my confidence. I need to sort of see something, you know, looking quite pretty quite quickly. You know, so I'll try and avoid any prolonged areas of ugliness, if that makes sense. You know, we all go through the ugly stage, but I'll try and avoid it lasting too long, which is why I kind of use this technique. So if you're new to pencils, you know, the layering is crucial, you know, particularly when you're creating realism, because you're building up all of that lovely depth, and you're also bringing in sort of like the values and stuff like that in there. The other really crucial bit about the layering is that you use your pencil in the right direction. So in this case, it's in the direction that the horse's hair is growing. That is absolutely vital for realism because it helps to create the form, you know, and it shows what's sort of going on underneath the hair and the skin, basically. So this week, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about a technique that I use all of the time, subtraction technique that I use predominantly, I guess, on drafting film. And this is where you put your pigment in and then you use something like an eraser or a craft knife or a slice tool to lift out that pigment so that you create shapes, texture, highlights, that type of thing. So this is my latest tutorial, this little baby hare, this leveret. And as you can see, I'm working on drafting film. I've put all the pigment in on the top of the head, and I'm now starting to bring in texture and highlights, a little bit of shaping into that fur, so it actually looks like fur. You know, and what I tend to do with a piece like this is I'll try to ignore the detail in the fur as much as I possibly can, and get all of the values and the tones and the colour and everything in first, and then come in over the top and create all of that lovely detail in there. And I'll use a combination of the Tombow, which is the little eraser that you can see here, and the slice tool. The Tombow I love it's like just using a white pencil basically, and you just come in and it creates these lovely sort of soft highlights. I've just used a blusher brush just to wipe away the the pencil dust that accumulates. And what you'll find is the more you use the Tombow, it picks up the pigment on the end of it. And I have just like a little piece of sandpaper on my desk next to me, and I just rub the end on that every now and again. It lifts off all of the pigment, so you're not kind of just transferring it back onto the film, which is another really great tip actually. Once I've added sort of a few bits of the Tombow, which gives you that much softer look, I'll then start to bring in the slice tool. So this is the manual pen cutter. It's the one with the orange button, so the blade stays out. I tend to put it upside down in my hand because I'm right-handed, upside down in my hand, turn around to the left a little bit, and I use the edge of the blade just to sort of carve out and scrape out some of the more prominent highlights. And it's a really, really fantastic way of getting all of this gorgeous, gorgeous texture and detail into a piece like this. You can see you've got really good control over it, and you can make sort of softish marks and you can make harder marks. Combine that with the Tombow and you can get a really, really lovely effect. Now, one of the things that I see people, or one of the questions that people ask me about a lot is, how on earth do you get the slice tool to work? And I think what happens is people tend to use it in a cutting fashion. So you'll use it as if it's a knife and you'll use the very, very end of it. Whereas you can see I'm actually using it upside down. And I'm using the edge of the slice tool, which is a little bit chiseled, just to sort of gently scrape away the pigment. And for a piece like this, for hair like this, it's fantastic. What happens is you scrape the pigment away, but it also leaves a little tiny bit of an indentation on the top of the film. So it means that when you start to bring pencil back in over the top, it skips out. It skips where the slice mark is. So you can see here where I'm starting to bring this walnut brown polychromos in now, in between these slice marks a little later on. You can really, really start to get the feeling of depth in the fur. It looks like there's fur sitting over the top of, layered over the top of, the fur that's underneath it. So when I teach how to create something as simply as possible for it to look really, really realistic, but it to be as simple as possible. And sometimes when you look at a piece like this, you think, oh my goodness, this is impossible. I couldn't ever do anything like that. But it's about looking beneath the details. It's about looking beyond the details, if you like, and learning processes that really, really help. And it doesn't mean that you have to be amazing at drawing or anything like that. It's all about understanding how the fur works and understanding how your pencils will work, so you're going to be able to get that effect.